An 8-year-old Riverview boy telling deputies that he saw his father shoot his mother. And that woman and a little girl are now dead.
Following the shooting, deputies say O'Neill tried to burn down the house. Deputies needed stun guns to take him into custody.
That child told them, quote, "My dad shot my mom," meaning he could be a key witness in this case.
Mr. O'Neill, I will adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to life in prison. This is the worst case ever in my life.
She loved her children. She did everything she could. She took good care of those kids. She was the best mom. She was lovable. Just a sweethearted person.
March 18th, 2018, Riverview, Florida. It's almost midnight when a 911 call comes into the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department.
What's the address of your
I'm shot. Help me, please.
What's your address?
Help me, please. He's shot me.
Where?
On the line, you can hear a man's voice cutting in and out behind the conversation. And at one point, the dispatcher clearly hears him screaming, like completely losing it. "She killed me. She killed me. Allah Akbar."
Allah Akbar.
Ma'am, hello. Ma'am.
Right now, come out here and help me kill it. Now!
The woman was only able to give part of the address, and then about 4 minutes later, the call suddenly cuts off. Law enforcement immediately heads out to a house at 13248 Pike Lake Drive. And while they're on the way, more calls start coming in. Neighbors are calling in, one after another.
Hello, 911. What is your emergency?
Yes, my neighbor is beating up his girlfriend next door.
The woman who made that first call runs straight to her neighbor's house and starts pounding on the door like completely frantic. And right behind her, a man comes running out holding a shotgun in his hands.
911. What is your emergency?
Hey, I just been attacked by some white demons inside Kiki. Kiki, her name is Kiki, and she tried to kill me.
What's the address?
Huh?
People started coming out of their houses after hearing screams slicing through the quiet of the neighborhood. Some peeked out cautiously, others watched in pure horror. One man couldn't look away. Right in front of him, the attacker grabbed the woman and began brutally beating her with a shotgun. The blows were wild, chaotic, this vicious mix of rage and completely unchecked violence. James Gray woke up to those same screams. They were so piercing, so intense. There was no doubt something terrible was happening. He walked to the door and looked through the peephole. What he saw made him freeze a man standing over a woman lying face down right outside his home. She wasn't moving. James immediately told his fiancée to call 911 and asked if she recognized them. She looked closer and said she knew the man. It was Ronnie O'Neill. James stepped outside. O'Neill was standing over the woman, gripping her arm tightly like he couldn't let go even after what he'd done. Before James could even say a word, O'Neill suddenly turned toward him and started yelling, "You don't understand. She killed me. She killed me." He kept repeating it over and over like he was stuck on that sentence. Then, just like that, he dropped the woman's arm, turned around, and calmly walked back toward the house, leaving her lying there on the ground. At 11:49 p.m., sheriff's deputies arrived on scene. The woman was still lying in the yard. Paramedics quickly pronounced her dead. She was declared deceased right there. But when officers turned their attention to the nearby house, they saw something even worse. Fire was starting to break out from inside. The house was on fire. As they got closer, the garage door suddenly began to rise. Through the smoke, O'Neill stepped out and walked straight toward them. Deputies repeatedly ordered him to stop and get on the ground, but he completely ignored every command. Eventually, they were forced to use a taser and physically shove him into a patrol car. Inside the vehicle, he became aggressive, yelling and screaming that Kiki was the devil, that the children were children of the devil. His voice sounded hysterical, broken up, like he was living in an entirely different reality. Meanwhile, firefighters began pushing their way into the burning home. Staggering toward them came a small boy, barely able to stay on his feet. Blood was pouring from his mouth. His body was covered in stab wounds, his skin burned, his clothes still smoldering. One detective later said it looked like someone had tried to dismember the child. The injuries to his torso were that severe. "My dad killed my mom," the boy whispered. And then he collapsed, losing consciousness and falling straight to the ground. One firefighter finally managed to make it deeper inside the house. He moved along the wall, keeping one hand against it. The smoke was so thick he couldn't see even inches in front of him. The air was heavy, suffocating. Suddenly, he slipped and fell. The floor was completely covered in blood. Knives were scattered everywhere, bloody, tossed across the room. He slowly reached out his hand and suddenly felt a body. It was a little girl. She was bleeding heavily and she was on fire. The firefighter grabbed her and carried her outside, laying her down on the ground. Another firefighter rushed over to help. The girl was so brutally mutilated she was almost unrecognizable. She was nearly decapitated. Later, the firefighter said he just broke down right there, crying, and a colleague had to hold him up. He physically couldn't stand on his own. Detective Mike Blair was rushing to the scene. Over the years, he had seen hundreds of crime scenes, but what he encountered that night would change him forever. By the time he arrived, the 7-year-old boy, now identified as Ronnie Jor, was already being airlifted to the hospital. A medic said it plainly: his chances of survival were extremely low. The boy had been stabbed 20 times. The two victims who had died were his mother and his sister, 33-year-old Kenyatta Barron, known as Kiki, and her 9-year-old daughter, Rave O'Neill, who everyone called Nee. The man in handcuffs being taken to the station was Ronnie O'Neill III. 33-year-old Kiki was his on and off partner, and Nee and Ronnie Jor were their children together. Kiki suffered multiple stab wounds, was shot with a shotgun, and brutally beaten. The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma. Nee was attacked with an axe, shot in the neck, and set on fire. He also stabbed his son multiple times before setting him on fire as well. After that, while gasoline was being poured around the scene, O'Neill gave his first police interview at 4 a.m., held without bond, as investigators tried to figure out what the hell had just happened. His answers were vague. He seemed detached, like he wasn't really present. He couldn't say what day it was or what time it was. Even simple questions like whether he had brothers or sisters visibly confused him. In the past, he had joined the Reserve Officer Training Corps, worked as a truck driver, and held a job at a gaming facility. In 2010, he became involved with a group called BYOR, also known as BYC, a local social organization that worked in low-income neighborhoods and focused on mentoring youth. Realistically, based on everything investigators had already seen and heard, including the 911 recordings, there was more than enough evidence to file charges. Still, they hoped he might say something more. When they returned to Pike Lake Drive, all that remained was a sea of yellow tape and the flashing of police lights. Kiki Barron had recently returned to school and enrolled at Hillsborough Community College. Her son Ronnie said she was an amazing mom, always telling people how proud she was of her kids, always playing with them, especially football in the yard. She was a great cook too, and according to him, she made the best bean pie and chicken wings. Kiki's mother, Carrie, said her daughter lived for her children. Every wall in the house was covered with photos. After several difficult years, Kiki ended her relationship with O'Neill, but against her mother's advice, she allowed him to stay with her for a few months just until he could get himself together. 9-year-old Nye was born prematurely. She had autism and cerebral palsy. She couldn't walk, was nonverbal, used a wheelchair, and communicated with a few hand gestures. Her brother learned parts of that language just to communicate with her. At school, she was often praised for how happy she was and how hard she tried. She loved Oreos, bright clothes, earrings, and wore a different bow in her hair for every day of the week. Detective Mike Blair continued gathering information. With 5 children of his own, he admitted this hit him incredibly hard. No amount of experience prepares you for something like this. Against all odds, 7-year-old Ronnie survived. He was rushed into surgery. Skin grafts covered more than 30% of his body, 1 lung had collapsed, and he depended on a ventilator and a feeding tube. Detective Blair came to visit him and at one point simply turned on a movie just to calm the boy as he drifted in and out of sleep, suspended between pain and survival.
An 8-year-old Riverview boy telling deputies that he saw his father shoot his mother. And that woman and a little girl are now dead.
Hey, Keith, good evening. Right now, people around here are really scratching their heads over this one, wondering what went on inside this home, causing someone to snap, take lives, and even hurt young kids.
It's devastating. It's not only that, it's like right here at my house, too. My home. We're right close to it.
Erica Worthy can't believe it, telling us it seemed like yesterday that Kenyatta Barron was helping her son with math.
I really feel really bad for little Ronnie, because when he actually come out of whatever he's in right now, he's going to be traumatized.
Deputies also tell us they found a man named Ronnie O'Neill III inside the home, smelling like gasoline. They had to use a taser to take him down.
Neighbors heard the horrible moment.
It sounded like, just like, that's why I thought it was like a crash, but I guess it was like a shot from his gun.
Right now, it's just a blow to the whole family. It really is. We don't understand it.
His neighbor says he had no idea about his personal life, but did say he had witnessed tense moments between O'Neill and Barron.
It was like raining outside and he was yelling at his wife on the shed they had on the back. He was like up on top of the shelf yelling at his wife, and he was like going crazy.
Following the shooting, deputies say O'Neill tried to burn down the house. Deputies needed stun guns to take him into custody. He's shown here in jail, where if deputies have their way, he will remain for a very long time.
She loved her children. She did everything she could. She took good care of those kids. She was the best mom. She was lovable. Just a sweethearted person.
When Ronnie was finally stable enough physically and emotionally to talk, he told investigators everything he could remember, slowly, carefully, sometimes stopping to pause and gather himself. These were the memories of a child who survived something no child should ever have to live through. He spoke only about what he personally saw and heard, not adding anything extra, not trying to change it, not trying to soften or dramatize it. His account was clear in its simplicity, and that's exactly what made it so hard to hear. Over the years, it never changed. The details, the order of events, the key moments all stayed the same no matter how much time passed after the tragedy. Investigators went back to his words again and again, compared them with the evidence, and every single time they matched. That consistency is still there today. You can hear it in the recording of that interview. A recording that sounds calm, almost ordinary, but behind every sentence is trauma, pain, and a truth that time can't erase.
Basically, I was sitting in my room and I saw my mom and my dad arguing in their room. I just saw my dad holding a shotgun. My mom ran into my sister's room into the closet.
And when your mother ran into your sister's room, what did your father do? Did he go after her?
Yes. My sister was sitting on the bed, and then my dad told me to walk around and say, like, some words. Allah Akbar.
Was there a time when your mother was able to get out of the closet?
I just saw her, like, she was, like, stumbling outside, and then I just saw my dad chase her.
Did he do something to your sister?
He dragged her, like, dragged her into my parents' room. He hit her with an axe in the head, and then in the back, and the back, and then the head. And then, like, I saw her eyes roll, and then there was blood everywhere. He lighted something with tissue and a match.
Do you remember your father ever having a can of gasoline?
Yes, he, like, spread it everywhere, and then he got the match, and then he dropped it on the ground, and then like all the fire up here. He put me on the ground, and then he, like, had his foot on top. I was laying on my stomach. He had his foot on top of me, and he was holding me down. And he was, like, lighting a match. He was lighting a match with the tissue. No, but I remember actually before that, He called someone, I don't know who, and he said, I just killed someone. I just killed this person.
The next thing he remembered was someone leaning over him and placing an oxygen mask on his face. The air felt heavy, the sounds turned muffled and far away, and then everything went dark. When Ronnie opened his eyes again, he was already in the hospital, under bright lights, surrounded by machines and unfamiliar voices. This family had been living with a long, heavy history of domestic violence and constant conflict. For years, Kiki had called 911 back when they were still living together. Those calls were cries for help, repeated over and over again. The couple fought regularly about money, about control, about the fact that O'Neill didn't respect her personal space or her boundaries. She often asked him to leave the house, but he refused. And almost every one of those conflicts ended the same way. He completely lost control and started destroying the home, turning it into pure chaos. He would take her car without permission, and when Kiki begged him to stop, he grabbed a car jack and hurled it into the windshield. Then he coldly said that if he couldn't drive it, nobody would. Police were called, but the incident was classified as minor criminal property damage. A sheriff's deputy gave Kiki the paperwork to press charges, but she never filed it, which, sadly, is incredibly common in domestic violence cases when fear and exhaustion take over. O'Neill also had a long history of legal trouble outside of this case. It included drug-related offenses, driving without a license, and fraud. Just a few months before the tragedy, he was involved in a drive-by shooting and barely survived. After that, none of his relatives were willing to take him in. That's when he showed back up at Kiki's house, looking for somewhere to stay, returning to an environment already filled with fear and tension. Family members also said he had a history of serious mental health issues. Detectives added another disturbing detail. There was evidence suggesting that shortly before the tragedy, there had been conflicts inside the home related to his attempts to convert the family to Islam, which only made the tension worse. 7-year-old Ronnie told deputies from his hospital bed that right before the incident, his parents had been talking about God and religion. Those were the last conversations he remembered, the final moments before his life split into before and after. While O'Neill waited for court proceedings, his 7-year-old son, Ronnie, was going through painful and intensive treatment in the hospital. Despite the severity of his injuries, doctors noted that his recovery was going remarkably well. Almost constantly by his bedside was the same person, Detective Mike Blair. Even though his role in the case was supposed to be limited, he couldn't stop thinking about Ronnie, about what his family had been through, and about what his life was going to look like now. Another detective mentioned that Ronnie was a huge football fan. Hearing that, Blair reached out to his contacts with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, hoping the team might do something nice for the boy. The organization immediately agreed to help, and team representatives even offered to visit him personally at the hospital. That day, Blair was the last one to leave the room. As he was getting ready to go, Ronnie suddenly grabbed his hand and, very softly, almost in a whisper, asked, "Could you watch a movie with me?" Blair was technically off shift, but he promised he'd come back. He called his wife Danielle, and together they returned to the hospital. That evening, they sat next to Ronnie and watched Power Rangers, a simple movie that for a few hours gave the boy back a piece of his childhood. A legal guardian was appointed for Ronnie, and he was placed with a foster family. He continued coming in for countless medical checkups and procedures, and Blair always found a moment to stop by and just say hello. But during one of those visits, the detective suddenly realized something. It was time to say goodbye for good. And that's when he turned to the guardian and said, "If he ever needs anything, just call me." And sure enough, that call did come. The moment arrived unexpectedly, but at the same time, it felt unavoidable. Ronnie was having an incredibly hard time in the home where he was living then. Strange walls, unfamiliar voices, that constant feeling of being temporary, all of it only deepened his confusion and pain. The guardian, seeing the state the boy was in, called Blair and asked him directly what to do next. "Bring him to me," Mike said without hesitation. And just like that, almost with no preparation at all, no packed bags, no toys, just the clothes he was wearing, 7-year-old Ronnie arrived at Blair's home. this wasn't a planned move. It was more like a rescue, a decision made in a moment when there simply wasn't another option. Meanwhile, O'Neill was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, 1 count of attempted murder, arson, and aggravated child abuse. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. The state immediately announced it would seek the death penalty, emphasizing the extreme brutality of the crimes. Before the trial could even begin, O'Neill underwent multiple evaluations by doctors and court-appointed experts. They assessed his mental state, his ability to understand what was happening, and whether he could participate in his own defense. After a long process, interviews, examinations, and expert conclusions, in October 2018, O'Neill was declared incompetent to stand trial. That decision sparked outrage among Kiki's family and friends, who saw it as yet another injustice. 2 months later, the court issued a separate ruling O'Neill was stripped of his parental rights to Ronnie as well as to another child he had with a different woman. Legally, his connection to his children was permanently severed. In the Blair household, they understood very clearly what foster care meant, that one day Ronnie might leave and be placed with another family. That was the reality they tried to prepare themselves for. When the boy first arrived, he was deeply sad, withdrawn, and confused. In his eyes, there was a constant fear of being left again. Every single day, he asked the same questions over and over. Am I gonna have to move again? How long am I gonna be here? How long can I stay? Mike and Danielle realized pretty quickly one simple, painfully important thing. There was no way they could just say goodbye to him. It wasn't about timing or circumstances. It was a feeling, and it became clear almost immediately. They understood they had grown far more attached to Ronnie than they ever expected. And that's when a big, life-changing decision was made. Ronnie isn't going anywhere. He's part of this family now. Not temporarily, not for now, forever. In June 2019, after additional evaluations and multiple assessments of the defendant's mental state, a judge ruled that O'Neill was competent to stand trial. That meant the case could finally move forward. Still, the actual start of the trial was delayed another 2 years. It wasn't until June 2021 that proceedings officially began. This case, nearly 3 years in the making, drew nationwide attention for another reason as well. O'Neill made the decision to represent himself in court, acting as his own attorney. It was a move literally everyone tried to talk him out of. Defense attorneys, experts, even the judge herself. As you know, she told him in open court, you do have the right to represent yourself, but you also have the full right to an attorney. I am required to warn you that self-representation carries serious risks and disadvantages. You will be held to the same standards as trained legal professionals, regardless of your experience or lack of preparation. Despite those warnings, O'Neill refused to back down. He claimed that public defenders would not use what's known as Florida's Stand Your Ground doctrine, a law that says a person has no duty to retreat and may use deadly force if they believe they're facing serious bodily harm or death. But in this case, that doctrine simply did not apply. It didn't fit the facts. It didn't match the evidence. And once that was made clear, O'Neill fully rejected legal counsel and chose to defend himself, a decision that only intensified the chaos, tension, and unease surrounding one of the most disturbing trials in recent memory.
Bizarre turn of events in a brutal murder case out of Riverview. Ronnie O'Neill, the man accused of killing his girlfriend, their daughter, and then trying to kill his son, is demanding his son be left out of the investigation.
Yeah, good morning, Gail. O'Neill wrote this letter to the judge asking that his son be removed from this investigation because now he's saying he's concerned about his son's well-being. Now, this could be important because the night all of this happened, investigators told us that that child told them, quote, "My dad dad shot my mom, meaning he could be a key witness in this case. Take a look. Here's the letter I'm talking about. In the letter written to the judge, O'Neal writes that the state is using his own child as a material witness, and he wants to protect his child from any interrogation by law enforcement. He writes that he is worried about the psychological well-being of his son. He's also asked the judge to move the case out of Hillsborough County so he can get a fair trial. O'Neal does have a hearing today regarding some public records issues, and of course, this letter could be brought up in front of the judge this afternoon as well. Of course, if it is, we'll let you know what the results are. Gail?
So he allegedly brutally attacks his own son, and now he's trying to protect him? All right, thanks, Avery.
He often screamed at the jurors, was agitated and unpredictable, and his big defence was that the case had been fabricated by the police. The 911 calls Kiki had made were fake, and law enforcement had tampered with evidence and coached his now 11-year-old son Ronnie to say things.
Called 911.
The state began their opening statements by playing the 911 call Kenyatta Barron made just before midnight. During the call, you can hear Barron screaming and pleading for her life. The state says Ronnie O'Neal III hunted her down as she hid from him in a bedroom closet. They eventually ended up at their neighbor's front door, where Assistant State Attorney Scott Harmon says O'Neal beat her to death with a shotgun.
That's the barrel, the tip of the barrel with a dent in it.
Harmon says he then killed his daughter, who had autism and couldn't speak.
She couldn't beg for her life.
Evidence is going to show I loved my children. And the evidence is going to prove to you.
In court, he was aggressive and completely chaotic. He shouted at the jury, constantly interrupted people, raised his voice, stayed visibly agitated, and was wildly unpredictable. His emotional outbursts created this constant sense of danger in the courtroom, like at any second, things could spiral out of control. No one ever knew what was coming next from him, another scream, an insult, or some new absurd claim. The core of his defense was the assertion that the entire case had supposedly been fabricated by the police. He insisted law enforcement followed a pre-written script, planted evidence, and deliberately twisted the facts. He specifically claimed that the 911 calls, the ones officially attributed to Kiki, were fake and staged. And it didn't stop there. He also claimed that police had coached his now 11-year-old son, Ronnie, telling him exactly what to say in court and during interviews, essentially using the child as a tool for the prosecution. At the same time, O'Neal argued that it wasn't Kiki who called 911 at all. He said it was him trying to shift blame and dismantle the key pillars of the case. These claims grew more and more disconnected from reality, but he repeated them again and again, loudly, aggressively, with absolute certainty. And every time he did, it only deepened the tension in the room, making the weight of the trial feel even heavier.
She threatened to kill me with a knife just a few weeks before the incident, and she was angry about my relationship with my other child's mom.
He says his son is unreliable when it comes to the, quote, actual facts of the case because he suffers from PTSD and that he has been coached on his responses. That boy survived and is expected to testify against his father at some point during this case.
And then something truly unprecedented happened in that courtroom. 11-year-old Ronnie took the stand to testify against his own father, and his father was the one questioning him.
How you doing?
Good.
It's good to see you, man. Did you see me beat your mom?
No.
Did you see me shoot your mom?
No.
But you did hear a shot that night. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when you heard that shot, where were you at that time?
Standing by the house front.
Do you know where your mom was shot at? And what part of the body she was shot in? Do you know anything about that?
No.
Now, you just said a while ago that I came back in and took your sister from her room to your mom's room and hit her with an axe, right?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
All right, very good.
Good one, all right?
All right, very good. It's time for redirect examination. So, Mr. The state may have a couple of follow-up questions for you.
Detective Mike Blair also took the stand. Calm, steady, and without unnecessary emotion, he told the jury that after everything that had happened, he and his wife took responsibility for Ronnie and were now raising him as their own child. They were simple words spoken in an even tone, but in that courtroom, they landed heavy, a quiet reminder of the price that had been paid because of this crime. When it was O'Neill's turn to address Blair, the room fell into a tense silence. He suddenly stopped talking and took a long, unnaturally drawn-out pause. The seconds stretched on like time itself had slowed down on purpose. Everyone held their breath, watching his every move, every shift in his expression, waiting to see what he would say next and whether this moment would turn into yet another eruption in an already emotionally charged courtroom. Thank you. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything you've done. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Blair left the courtroom in silence. No gestures, no comments. He didn't look back. Behind him, the room was left thick with heavy air, tension, and the unmistakable feeling that this case would never truly release the people who had lived through it. O'Neill's behavior throughout the trial kept everyone on edge. His emotional explosions, sudden mood swings, shouting, chaotic remarks, and open contempt for the court created a constant sense of unpredictability. There was no feeling of control in that room, only the expectation that another outburst was coming. Veteran trial attorney Anthony Rickman, who was not involved in the case but followed it closely like many other legal professionals and observers, noted that this kind of behavior is extremely rare even in the most difficult criminal trials. According to him, every single court session carried a sense of nervous anticipation because no one could predict what O'Neill might do or say next. He said,
"Watching a man accused of 2 horrific murders, screaming at the jury. And if you look at how he behaved throughout the entire trial, the way he paced the courtroom, his body language, his gestures, the rage, the sudden bursts of anger, those sharp mood swings, he basically painted a picture himself of what he was likely like at the moment those murders were committed."
It was time for closing arguments.
He showed you a fraudulent recording where they allege that I beat Kenyatta Barron to death. He talked about Mr. Khalil Brown, my neighbor who stayed across the street. But if Mr. Khalil Brown was a help to them proving me guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, they would have called Mr. Khalil Brown. And like I told you earlier, you will know the truth, whether in this trial or the next one. Better believe it. If you think I'm here to play around with y'all, God damn it, I'm not.
All right, Mr. O'Neill, please stop using swearing language. It's not appropriate in a closing argument.
Now, he played a recording that was sped up. Why didn't you play the regular recording that people can understand what the call was saying?
Objection to the defendant asking me questions, Your Honor.
Mr. O'Neill, listen, please just keep in mind this is not personal towards the prosecutors. Please keep your comments directed towards the evidence and the law.
After a 2-week trial, everything that could be said had been said. The testimony was in, the evidence had been laid out, both sides had made their arguments. There were no words left in the room, only heavy silence and a sense that the outcome was unavoidable. The case was officially handed over to the jury. They left the courtroom carrying the weight of everything they had heard. Behind closed doors, deliberations began, but they didn't last long. Just a few hours, and that was enough. The facts were too clear, the picture of the crime too precise, and the testimony too consistent to leave any real room for doubt. When the jurors returned, the room went quiet again. Their verdict surprised no one. For many, it had felt inevitable long before that moment, the logical end to one of the most brutal stories ever told in that courtroom.
Guilty on all counts. This evening, a Hillsborough County jury convicted Ronnie O'Neill of murdering his girlfriend, their daughter, and nearly killing his son.
He was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated child abuse, and 1 count each of resisting law enforcement and arson. The combined weight of those convictions was crushing. Each charge on its own reflected extreme violence, and together they formed a picture of absolute brutality. When the case moved into the sentencing phase, where the court had to decide whether he would receive the death penalty, O'Neill abruptly changed his strategy. After months of chaotic behavior, he finally allowed attorneys to fully represent him. At that stage, the defense focused heavily on his mental health, trying to convince the court and the jury that he had not been acting with a sound mind. Defense attorneys argued that he suffered from schizophrenia and a delusional disorder. They also pointed out that he had been injured just months before the murders, that he had experienced sexual abuse as a child, and that he was living with post-traumatic stress disorder. According to the defense, all of this combined into an explosive mix that slowly pushed him toward a complete psychological breakdown. This was a case of an idle mind being the devil's workshop, the attorneys told the court. They said O'Neill lived in a constant state of perceived threat, believing he was under attack, barely sleeping, deeply paranoid, and stuck in a state of nonstop hypervigilance, where every sound or movement felt dangerous. One doctor who evaluated his mental condition on 13 separate occasions confirmed that O'Neill frequently experienced hallucinations and paranoid delusions. The doctor added that the capital offense had been committed during a period when the defendant was under extreme mental or emotional disturbance. Those statements became central to the jury's consideration during sentencing. In the end, O'Neill avoided the death penalty. The reason was purely legal. In the state of Florida, a death sentence requires a unanimous jury decision, and that unanimity was never reached.
On count 1, Mr. O'Neill, I will adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to life in prison with a minimum mandatory of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Count 2, sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Count 3, I'm going to sentence you on the attempted murder, adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to life in prison. On count 4.
In the end, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional sentence of up to 60 years. It meant one thing: he would never walk free again. The court drew a final line, sealing a sentence meant to permanently separate him from society. Carrie, Kiki's mother, addressed him directly in the courtroom. Her voice shook with pain and anger as she called him a coward and openly said that, in her view, the jury had made the wrong decision. For her, the sentence was far too lenient and didn't come close to matching the scale of the harm he caused. The prosecution agreed with her assessment, stating that, in their opinion, this case truly warranted the death penalty. Prosecutors emphasized that the level of brutality, intent, and violence in this case went far beyond what's seen in ordinary criminal acts. Kiki's sister, Diada, was also deeply devastated by the sentence. She said he took the life of a child with disabilities and her mother in the most inhumane, barbaric way possible, and that no court ruling could ever restore what was lost or ease the pain the family is now forced to live with every single day. He just slaughtered them. And if you can't tell me that this deserves a life sentence, then honestly, I've lost a little faith in the justice system. Because if anything is worthy of life, this is it. Ronnie O'Neill III addressed the court one final time.
I'm not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
Judge Michelle Cisco warned him clearly and coldly. If he raised his voice one more time or disrupted the courtroom in any way, she would immediately order him removed. It wasn't a threat, more like a flat statement of consequences. There was no anger in her tone, no irritation, no sympathy. just total control of the room and a firm line that would not be crossed again. After that, she moved into her final statement. The courtroom fell completely silent. The words that followed were hard to listen to, even for people who had spent years in the justice system and seen some of the worst cases imaginable. Her speech was incredibly powerful. Not loud, not dramatic, not theatrical. It was heavy, direct, and painfully honest. At times, the judge had to stop and pause, holding back tears as they welled up in her eyes. In other moments, she struggled to find the right words, and all the emotional weight of the case was that overwhelming. It felt like every sentence took effort to push through, and still, she fought to remain professional to the very end. She kept her judicial restraint, her precision, that cold legal clarity. But to everyone in the room, it was obvious this case had reached her on a deeper level than most. She wasn't just delivering a sentence in another criminal case. She had walked through a story that left devastation behind it, deep pain, and a sense of injustice that has no explanation and no excuse.
When the person from fire department, when he testified, and when he said that he retrieved the body of Ronivia O'Neill from the home, and all he could do was sob. It took every ounce I had not to start sobbing too, because there is no way any person with any feeling could have witnessed or seen the photos of what occurred that night and not be haunted for the rest of your life. The way that Miss Barron died was horrific, and that 911 call, which captured truly all of it. You heard, and everyone who's heard that 911 call heard a death scream. If anybody ever wants to know what it sounds like before a human being dies, knowing that their death is imminent, that's exactly what it is. What happened to little Ronivia and to little Ronnie, but I'm going to focus on Ronivia because she was special. Little Ronivia, she couldn't scream, she couldn't run away. She already had a life where she was born with challenges. But the pain and suffering that she suffered that night at your hands, unspeakable. That first time you struck her with that hatchet, and little Ronnie testified that all he could see was tears coming out of his sister's face. At that moment, that child knew she was being betrayed in the cruelest, most tragic, and sorrowful way that a child could ever be betrayed. She was being betrayed by her parent, the one person that should be there to protect their children and love them and keep them from harm. And that was the last thing that child felt before she passed on from this earth, was your utter, cruel betrayal to her. I'm going to look you in the eye and tell you, this is the worst case ever in my life. And I have seen some horrors, but this is it.
Later on, O'Neill filed an appeal demanding a new trial and trying to challenge both the verdict and the court's decision. But the court carefully reviewed every argument from the defense and ultimately denied the appeal, finding no grounds to reopen the case. The ruling stood. The sentence became final and irreversible. The sheer brutality of what happened that night in March 2018 is honestly hard to even process. This is one of those crimes that just doesn't make sense no matter how many times you reread the case files or try to explain it logically. Harry said that Kiki and Nee were a true light in so many people's lives, warm, vibrant, genuine light that drew others in. And that light was extinguished far too soon, taken in the most barbaric, inhumane way imaginable. My family is my life. I breathe for my family. And now you've left me gasping for air, Carrie told the court. Their lives were taken in a way that's beyond horrific. And Ronnie was left with trauma that the mind can't even begin to comprehend. This isn't something you get over. It's something you carry with you, day after day. And that's where we end today's episode, with a small but meaningful ray of light in the middle of so much darkness. Ronnie O'Neill is now officially Ronnie Blair, and he's doing incredibly well in his new home with Mike and Danielle. It's a place where he's safe, where he's accepted without conditions, without warnings, without any but, where he isn't a guest or temporary, he's family. His new older brother, Hunter, said Ronnie very quickly became just like any little brother, with all the jokes, small mischief, and quiet moments of closeness that only happen in a real home. He's incredibly strong and honestly really funny, Hunter said. At this point, it's hard to imagine our family without him. He just became part of it. Ronnie says they're the best mom and dad. They really care about me, not in a formal way, not because they have to, but genuinely there's no one better than them. Having a family that will always help me get through whatever comes next, even when it's hard or scary, that means everything to me. I feel loved, and that feeling never goes away. They helped me get through the trial. The whole time, they were always there. They didn't walk away. They didn't leave me alone with what was happening. If I cried or needed help, I could go to them and talk about how I felt. I knew I could explain everything without fear, without shame. And every time I did, it felt a little lighter. Like the weight I was carrying got just a bit smaller, even if only for a moment. Ronnie loves performing and being in films. And even now, he dreams about becoming an actor one day. For him, it's not just a hobby or some childhood fantasy. It's a way to speak to the world without having to explain everything out loud. A way to express things that are sometimes too hard or too painful to put into words. Through roles, scenes, and the camera, he can be heard and for a moment kind of escape what permanently changed his life. On stage or in front of a camera, Ronnie gets to be someone else, live other stories, stories where pain doesn't always get the final word. He absolutely loves playing with the family dog. In those simple, everyday moments, there's a sense of calm, a feeling of normal life that he missed for so long. Ronnie also enjoys swimming. The water feels soothing, almost healing, and traveling with his whole family, where the journey itself becomes a chance to just be together. No pressure, no explanations, no need to prove anything. On top of that, he continues to receive regular therapeutic support through Blair, steady, consistent care that doesn't promise instant miracles, but works slowly and reliably. Step by step, it helps Ronnie learn to trust the world again, recognize his emotions, and gradually find his way back to himself. Over time, Ronnie is slowly but surely finding solid ground beneath his feet again. It's not a fast process, and it's definitely not an easy one. There are still hard days, painful memories, and moments that weigh heavy, but he's moving forward, not alone, and not without support. Detective Mike Blair said,
"Whatever lies ahead for Ronnie, we want him to go after it, and actually do it, without fear, without feeling like he owes anyone anything. With the right to dream, to choose his own path, and to live his own life, even after everything he's been through. They all understand one simple but painfully honest truth. Nothing and no one will ever replace what Ronnie lost. No words, no amount of care, no new family can erase who his parents were to him. That loss is permanent. It will stay with him like a shadow, like a part of his story. Danielle and I have always told him this. We will never try to replace your mom and dad. We don't have that right, and we'll never take it. They were, they are, and they always will be your parents. We're just here to support you, to help you stand back up, and to make sure you never feel like you're alone in this world."
Ronnie carries warm, vivid memories of life before that night, of a time when the house was filled with voices, laughter, and a sense of safety. Of everyday moments that once felt ordinary but later became priceless. In their home, they still talk openly about his mom, Kiki, and his sister, Nivea. Their names don't disappear. They aren't erased. They live on in conversations, in memories, in those quiet evenings when words carry extra weight. It's not a forbidden topic, and it's not pain they try to bury or avoid with silence. It's part of the family, part of their life, part of who Ronnie is today. And whenever stress, anxiety, or anger hits Ronnie, those heavy, overwhelming emotions that even adults sometimes struggle to handle this, family has a simple but incredibly meaningful ritual, almost like a mantra. A few words that bring him back to the present, ground him, and remind him that he's not alone. Every night before bed, Mike looks at him and asks, in a calm, almost casual voice, like it's the easiest question in the world, "Hey, remind me, who are you?" And even now, as Ronnie is a teenager, even when he just smiles faintly or rolls his eyes a little, kind of embarrassed by the tradition, his answer never changes. It's always the same, clear, steady, without hesitation, almost like a promise to himself, like an anchor he can grab onto when things get hard. I'm safe, I'm loved, and I'm part of this family. Friends, I just want to sincerely thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. This was an incredibly heavy, painful case. And I want to be honest with you while working on this video. There were moments when I had tears in my eyes. Some stories can't be told from a distance. They get under your skin, break through your defenses, and leave a mark, even when you're just the viewer or the one telling the story. Please don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. It truly means a lot to me to hear what you felt, how this story landed with you. And if you'd like, you can subscribe to the channel and like this video. It genuinely helps with visibility and makes it possible to keep sharing stories like this. Difficult ones, important ones. Stories that matter. Thank you from the heart to every single one of you for watching. Take care of yourselves and the people you love. See you next time.